Next on our agenda is a presentation by Mr. Robert Bowell, the program director with Step Up Ministries, which is an interfaith, community-based organization that prepares people who are ready and willing to make positive changes in their lives, to become more self-sufficient by offering a comprehensive program that focuses on education, employment, and housing. Mr. Bowell was raised in Oceana, California. He was born to Robert and Mary Bowell in 1968. He's the son of a Marine veteran. Mr. Bowell was recruited to play baseball by the University by UCLA and by USC. He graduated from high school in 1986. He's the father of 3 children. He was incarcerated, however, from 1992 to 2004 based upon drug offenses. While being confined, he took advantage of the education opportunities that were provided. When he was released from confinement, he sought assistance from Step Up Ministries here in Raleigh, and since that time he has worked been able to work through to become the program director of Step Up Ministries. Please welcome Mr. Robert Bowell.
I don't know. Is this thing on?
It's on.
Good morning. I want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you, Secretary Keller, for the introduction. Mr. Cooper, good to see you this morning. A little nervous this morning, so I've been to shiver a little bit. I've never been in this room with so many influential people at one time. As Mr. Keller was saying, I was incarcerated. I was incarcerated for 12 and a half years. I would like to say that my story is a little unlike most individuals. I come from a pretty solid background. As you heard, my father was a United States Marine, and so I come from a very disciplined family background. My mother and father are still together today after 41 years. So I had a pretty supportive background and a pretty good upbringing, but I made some bad choices. So today, I'd like to think that because of myself, there aren't bad people. People make bad choices. I decided to make some decisions that went against the grain of my family values, and that put me into the world of illicit drugs. For that, I was punished and penalized to 180 months in the federal prison system. However, while I was there, I have to tell you, I was surrounded by a lot of people from a lot of different places from all over the world. And I kind of understand the recidivism rate and the thought process that goes into that, because it's a mentality issue. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, when I went into the system, given 180 months in prison, which is 15 years, I think they give it to you in months like that, they confuse you sometimes too. Believe it or not, one of my first thought processes when I went in was that I was going to go in and become better at what I got caught doing. Funny enough, right? 15 years sentence, but then I said, hey, I'm going to go in and figure out how to do this better. So I went in and educated myself and taught myself how to speak a little Spanish. I said, when I get out, I'm going to go to Colombia and go do it this way. And a gentleman approached me one day and he said, Robert, I want to tell you something. He says, I don't want you to get mad at me, though. And he says, I think you're a smart guy. And I said, well, why would I get mad about that? He says, but I think you're a smart dummy because you use all of your talents for all the wrong things. And so that kind of got me to open up my eyes a little bit and think about what it is that I'm capable of achieving, which those are some of the things that I tell people now, because sometimes we tend to treat individuals, even though they're adults, like children. And that prompted me to begin to read and learn more things about myself, be exposed to different cultures, And I took advantage of a lot of opportunities that were offered in prison. So that's why I kind of get a little discouraged when I hear a lot of the guys say, well, they didn't teach me anything, they didn't offer anything. Well, that's not true. I took computer courses. I made it a point, I went and got my welding certification. I took job readiness classes. And they had an industry while I was incarcerated. It was a printing industry. And I worked in that printing industry for about 8 years. Pretty excelled at it. It was what they call a super grade. This is pretty much as high as you could go in that field. So I did pretty good. So coming out, actually, believe it or not, I had about 5 years left before my sentence was complete. And my mother and father and I, we were sitting in the visiting room, and they would open this gate, and they would let people in. And then when it was time to go, they would let you out of the same gate. And I told my mother, I said, you know, I'm going to tell you something, and you might not believe this. I said, but if they were open up that gate right now and say, Mr. Battle, you can leave, I'd say, I don't want to go. And they were like, what? I was like, yeah, because I was learning a lot. And I felt like if they let me out, I hadn't learned enough to be able to get out here and succeed. That's how I felt. I just felt like there was more to learn. I was reading, I was educating myself, I was taking advantage of the computer classes, and I just didn't feel like I was ready. I was prepared to do the remaining 5 years that was needed to be done. So anyway, part of the process when you're in the federal system is that when it's time for you to be released, they send you to a halfway house. But I wanted to get out a little early. So they offered this 500-hour program. And I really liked this program. It was a drug program. But the funny thing about it was I didn't have a drug problem, but I guess because I sold drugs, I was a problem. So I went to this 500-hour drug program. It was 9 months. And so they bring me in this room and they sit me down and they say, well, all right, tell me what's wrong with you. I'm like, I thought that's what you were here for. So anyway, we started sitting down and we began to talk. So I thought that this class was going to be about barbiturates and methamphetamines and things of that nature. But it turned out to be a psychology 101 class, in my view. Because it talked about behaviors, unhealthy relationships, victims that you were responsible, whether it was something violent or whether it was leaving your kids for 12 and a half years, they're victims. So it talked about things like that, and it taught me a lot about my contribution to the community, my contribution as a parent, my contribution as a citizen. It just taught me a lot of those things. So when I came home, I was humble. I was humble and prepared to do whatever it took to be successful. So being released into this halfway house, which I thought was very good, because most people think that prison is bad, right? I called it the spanking that my parents couldn't give me. That's what I called it. So, but I liked it because it had structure. And then when I came to this halfway house, it had structure. You couldn't go here, you couldn't go there, but I didn't think it was a big deal. It was a mindset. I would see guys come in and out, hey, I don't want to be here, I don't want to do this, you got to do that. Well, if you're going to do the right thing, what difference does it make? So I was at this halfway house, and one of the requirements was that you must get a job within a certain period of time, and if you did not, you were sent back to the institution. So it was a mentality for me. I can remember going to my case manager and saying, listen, if I don't find a job in the next few days, I promise you, I will go get me some steel-toe boots, a hard hat, and I will hit a construction site and I will get a job. That's how I felt on the inside. And then God showed up. So I was on this bus looking for a job. A young lady gets onto this bus and she looks at me in my eyes and doesn't say a word. She sits down on the bus and we ride to our destination. She gets off. This was a Thursday. That Saturday she shows back up at this halfway house where I was residing. And she's walking this little baby around. I love kids. So I said, can I hold the baby? She says, yeah. So we're talking. I said, I believe I seen you on a bus this week. She said, were you on the Capitol bus? I said, yes, ma'am. I said, I was out looking for a job. She said, oh, okay. She picked up the baby, she walked away, she came back 15 minutes later, she gives me a phone number. And it was to Step Up Ministry. And she said, here, call these people, baby. I called the number, and I came to this program. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew that I was coming, and they were supposed to be able to help me find a job. A lot of the things that they taught in this class, I learned in my job readiness class in prison. So during the workshops, I excelled in the workshops, did pretty well. So I ended up getting a job working here at Step Up. So I wanted to thank the young lady who had given me the number. I never seen her again. So one night we're having a kind of a friends night for Step Up at one of the fundraisers' house, and there was one caterer, one young lady, and that young lady happened to be the same young lady that gave me that phone number to Step Up. She was catering to me. And I said, I've been looking for you. And she says, you have a job here now? I said, yes, ma'am. She says, well, my son came through that program and you got him a job. But I didn't even know it was your son. So I began, but while I was looking for a job, I thought it was going to be easy. I thought that I had a good, clean cut. I purged myself of all the jargon that's used in prison, the slang and things of that nature, because I knew that that would stereotype me. I changed the way that I look. I called it my Wally Cleaver look, just basic. And I went out and I started looking for jobs. Now, when I went to prison, you could just go in and you fill out an application and you gave it to the person, and if they liked you, they talked to you for a minute, they hired you. But when I came home, it was a little different. They want you to fax. They want you to email. You know, you call these phone numbers and they're automated. So finding a job was a little bit more difficult for me than I thought. So that's why when I came to Step Up Ministry, it kind of showed me how to find a job, but I didn't need to use it because they actually gave me a job. So some of my barriers that a lot of individuals have, I didn't have, but I'm prepared to talk to you about them because I face them every day. I work at an agency, like I said, called Step Up Ministry. We train over 400 people every year for job skills training. 76% of those individuals have criminal backgrounds. 92% of them do not have a high school diploma. And we're able to place, this year, probably about 200 people in jobs. And since I've been working here, we've placed over 850 people in employment. One thing that I can tell you about a barrier before a person even comes out of prison is that most individuals who are incarcerated were big dreamers. We dream a lot because you have a lot of time on your hands. And you can become whoever it is that you want to become while you're in prison. But sometimes that's an unrealistic point of view. There's a lot of guys who say, well, I want to get out, I want to become a businessman. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. But sometimes just because you sell an illicit drug, that doesn't make you a businessman. You're selling something that someone is addicted to. So they don't go out and get the adequate educations to become what it is that an individual wants to be. Individuals are institutionalized. And when I say institutionalized, I mean that they're accustomed to structure, but a structure doesn't necessarily mean accustomed to being responsible. There's a difference. Being responsible means getting up, going to work, doing the things that you have to do in your home, not because you have to. One of the things that I like to talk about when we hear about reentry is reentry. But my question is always, what are we re-entering to? If a person's going back to where they came from, and if where they came from is dysfunctional, it's not in a safe neighborhood, there really aren't a lot of jobs, and they're ill-equipped, then the chances of them returning back to prison are going to be great if they don't really have a lot of support. I had a lot of support, and it was tough for me. It was extremely tough for me, and it took me a long time, about a month or so, to get a job, which was a long time when I came home, which was in 2004. The job market was pretty strong, but it still was difficult for me. I thought I spoke well, I thought I dressed well, I thought I had the skills, but I still had a tough time finding a job. Lack of education, that's the biggest thing. We have a large number of individuals who don't even have a high school diploma. Reading and writing skills are very low. And going back to the institutionalized thing, it comes down to the communication skills of an individual who's been incarcerated. And that depends on how long you've been incarcerated. So if you've been incarcerated for like someone like myself for a long time, you tend to pick up a lot of bad habits, bad terminology. And then on top of that, we know that the corrections officers, they're there to do a job. So if you look at the big picture, you have corrections officers, they're there to do a job. They're not necessarily there to be the inmate's friend, because they have to have boundaries. And then you have the inmates who have to deal with the other inmate, so then they have those trust issues. And then you deal with that over the course of a period of time. Their communication skills diminish because of that, because they're not used to having effective conversations. Then, one of the issues that I had when I came home was I didn't have a driver's license. Just so happened my mother and father live in Rocky Mount, so they made the trip up here because they were able to get me to the places that I needed to go. But transportation is a big issue. You have a lot of individuals who come home from prison who have the skills, who have the fortitude, who have some support, but transportation, just because of that might be the Achilles heel of them becoming successful because they cannot get to point A to point B. I see a lot of individuals who come through our program who have fines, restitution, probation fees, child support issues, and all of these stressors that take place when they do come home. I know that this is a big issue. I don't know how you combat that or how we put that in a position where do we educate individuals and have individuals come into the prisons and teach individuals about child support or have child support work with them. I know that I tried to be a responsible father. So while I was incarcerated, I worked in the industry, so I was able to send money home to my baby's mothers every month because I didn't want to be deemed as a deadbeat father. But there's a lot, but I know this, as soon as I was released from prison, one of the first letters that I received was, Mr. Bowder, you owe us $25,000 in back child support. But I didn't, but they thought I did. But nevertheless, can you think of how shocking and how much of a stress that would be to an individual just coming home and trying to get a job and trying to get planted back in the community, and all of a sudden, boom, you have these fees, you have this child support, you have this money that's over here, so it forces individuals to do things that they might not normally do. And then, for instance, I always like to talk about Christmas time, because this is that time of year. People are coming home. And sometimes we have to be honest with an individual when they come home. They've been home, they've been gone for 8 or 9 years, the children have been away from them for 8 or 9 years. It's Christmas time, Daddy, I want something for Christmas. Or Mommy, I want something for Christmas. And the parents want to do, hey, I want to provide for them. And they go out and they'll do something that's ill-advised because they wanted to provide this gift. But my question to them is, what have they been doing for the last 8 or 9 years? They were okay then, they'll be okay now. So those are the kind of questions that we give individuals in our program. Then we have violent crimes and theft. Those are barriers for individuals. So if they have a crime like that on their record today in the job market, employers don't really look favorably upon those sort of crimes. You're better off having a drug charge these days than anything to do with fraud, theft, or violence. Most of the time individuals come out, even for myself, I didn't have any credit. I didn't have a great deal of money saved up. I sent it all home to my kids. I didn't have any budgeting skills. And even though I was ready to come home, I didn't have any goal-setting skills. No one sat down with me and said, hey, Robert, it's going to be tough when you get home. Here are 10 steps or 5 steps that we need to take immediately to see that you're in the right direction. That wasn't done. I just basically came home. I had my own thought process about how I thought it was supposed to be, and I set forth to try to succeed in the way that I thought was the most beneficial. And I call that just common sense. I just utilize what I've been taught, but a lot of individuals have not been taught the things that I've been taught. And I didn't know about a lot of resources. There are a lot of resources in the community that deal with housing, transportation, clothing, just things that help an individual get back on their feet. I did not know about one item of those because I'm not from Raleigh. So once I was released from here, the halfway house that I resided in, they didn't provide that either. It was basically, you go get a job, you need to have a job in 30 days, and if you don't, we're going to send you back to prison. You're talking about stress. Then, job preparation. I happen to be an individual who knew how to dress appropriately, knew what I needed to do. But what used to kind of send me for a loop was when I was in the halfway house, I would see different individuals have people bring clothing to them. But the clothing that they utilized for their job searches didn't match what needed to be on their backs for an interview. Jeans, football jerseys, basketball jerseys. I don't know if they didn't know how or they didn't have adequate access to, but clothing plays a part because your image says a lot about who you are. But none of that was taught either. So one of the things that I try to do now when I deal with individuals, you have to have an image that does not match what your criminal background says, what other people have said. I always use the scales of justice because you can use those same scales to your barriers of success, your potential to succeed. It matters how you stack it up. What are you willing to do to stack the scales in your favor? I had an unrealistic view of what an image was. Because when you're incarcerated, you live in two different worlds. You live in the world you live in behind those bars, which we think is the way that people live on the outside. And then you have the world that's going on the outside. And manipulation. I find that a lot of individuals who are released, they're very manipulative. If you let them, and if you don't know what that looks like. But anyone would try anything if they feel like they can get away with it. But being able to give a person true facts, realistic points of views about what needs to take place. And I do find that a lot of individuals who deal with ex-offenders, sometimes they're afraid of them. Like they're different people. But they're just individuals just like you and me. And I think that that's a misrepresentation. That's why it gives me pleasure to be able to stand in front of individuals like yourself and let you know that everyone is not carved from that plate. But I do know that people make mistakes. So we want to move forward and try to provide positive examples. Then there's lack of post-release support. I had a family. I happened to stumble in the doors of the halfway house, and then I happened to find Step Up. I was fortunate. But a lot of individuals, especially if you're incarcerated in the state, you do not have halfway houses. Some of them don't have family support. I would like to see, I don't know if this happens, but do the case managers inside of the state institutions, do they track who comes to see an inmate and how often do they get visits? To see if they do have support before we release them into the community so we know what sort of support they had while they were incarcerated, because if they didn't have any while they were incarcerated, surely they won't have any when they're released. Computer skills. A lot of individuals do not have basic computer skills. Today's job market and today's society, you need to be able to utilize the computer, even if you just have basic typing skills. I like to think of an inmate or someone like I call myself an inmate or a person as a prize fighter. For those of you who kind of look at things a little differently, but look at it as a prize fighter. I've been knocked out for the count for a little while. But I'm just an individual just like you who needs a little smelling salt from people in the community like yourself to wake me back up. Help me build trust and build confidence back in myself so that I can get back out there and fight and move forward in a successful way. I find that a lot of individuals who come home, they do not trust individuals. And when you don't trust individuals, you waste a lot of time. You waste a lot of time because you're missing out on things that are blessings, that are opportunities, that are available for you through certain windows, but if you don't recognize that, then you can't take advantage of it. And then there are not a lot of resources in the community for men. There are an abundance of resources in the community for women, but for an individual who is a male, who may have children, or if he's single, finding a place to live or finding resources that will assist you is very, very, very difficult. Just as some food for thought, I would like to see something where there's some sort of incentive or one thing I try to stay away from is we have to put the onus of success or succeeding on the inmates. I love forms where we're talking about doing for, but you have to put some of that on us, on me, to do some things to help myself become self-sufficient. Empower me, help me build some of the things and put forth some of the things that are already in me instead of giving me the things that I'm asking for, make me earn it, if that makes sense. I think I'm going to cover everything. Also, when I talk about the family and the support in the community, we have to get individuals connected to community services, pastors back in church, case managers, because sometimes a lot of individuals know what they want and they're capable of getting there, but they don't have the resources or the know-how to become successful or move forward in the right direction. Every day today, what we're finding now is that housing, yeah, that's a very important issue. A job, that's a very, very, very important issue. But do you really think that those two items alone are going to be the things that make a person successful coming out of prison? No. So my suggestion, if it were up to me, we have to get into the prisons, create an environment where there's incentive, set up institutions where one institution is designed for certain individuals to come to based on behavior, because a lot of this is based on behavior. What is it that you're willing to do? You have to perform this way in order to get to this point. You have a staging area where we start teaching these skills. And one of the big barriers, they can be through friendships, they can be through family. Those are what destroys or tears down a person's path to success. And we find that that is a big barrier. I think that one of the things that benefited me is I'm not from Raleigh. I don't know anyone. I didn't know anyone here. I know a lot of people now. So I was able to build my friendship Rolodex with positive people. I don't go out. I don't do those kind of things. I wasn't forced to live up to a reputation or a nickname. Once I came up, I was allowed to be me. So that played a part. So when the individuals are being released and we're sending them back to the same community with the same name and possibly going to end up doing the same thing, the result is recidivism. So to me, teaching people those skills, how to be a good parent, how to be a good son, how to be a good daughter, how to be a good worker, and what does that look like wrapped up? And maybe that $7.50 an hour job that you have, if we have the appropriate housing and other support in a person's life, then that doesn't seem that bad. There's a lot of individuals who come and say, well, I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to do that. Well, if that's the case, then you're going to have a tough time out here surviving and getting where you're supposed to be, because maybe where you are right now is where you're supposed to be. I hope I've been explicit enough. I tried to cover pretty much everything. I would open up the floor to questions if anyone has any.
First of all, Mr. Battle, thank you very much for being here and sharing this with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here and sharing this with us. You described yourself as atypical. Sounds like you came from an intact family. Sounds like you had some education when you went in. And it also sounds like even when you went in, you were motivated to do something productive with your time. But it seems that in a lot of cases with a lot of inmates, those things aren't there. So I've kind of got two questions for you. One is, what do we do to find out who's motivated to succeed? And perhaps thereby direct our efforts there. And secondly, what is your view of trying to give people motivation? Is that something that's already got to be there, or is it something that can be fostered?
Well, I think it's something that's already there. To the second question, I think it's something that's already there. I think that the environment is what induces certain behavior. I think that when you come into a certain environment, like an institution, you're forced to be someone that you're actually not. I tell you that when I went in, I had to put on a different makeup because of the environment that I was in. And when you're incarcerated, people respect you for different things. They respect you if you're strong. They respect you if you're a good athlete. I was able to filter my way through because I applied myself academically. So it's in a person. It's just a matter of putting them in an environment where they're not afraid to show, hey, I do have some smarts. Or, hey, I do have an opportunity. I do have some things that are not bad. There are some things that are good about me. And not feel embarrassed about that. Because sometimes if you put on a weak persona, that can be, that isn't looked at as a positive thing while you're in prison. So some people put on different makes and models to make themselves where they want to be for that environment. It's no different. You can see an individual who's been incarcerated for 10 years, and you see them when they're home, they're totally different than the person they were there because they were forced to do that. I was the same way. Now, the first question was, I'm A-type. What do we do to...
Well, the orator Frederick Douglass said it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds to me like you're describing a situation where the typical inmate is coming out without the skills that most people have spent a lifetime acquiring. So it sounds like we've got to find a motivated individual and someone who's thereby willing to acquire that range of skills.
And for the most part, a lot of them are willing. It's just a matter of sometimes it matters who's delivering the message, where they're receiving the information, and do they trust that source. And then, you know, when you're dealing with a lot of individuals from a lot of different cultures, a lot of different geographical backgrounds, it's hard to throw one rock in there and hit everyone. So you have to kind of be broad about how you educate and teach everyone. I think that if things were offered, if you put things in place to say, hey, this is offered to you and this is what that end will come to, I think that people would be more inapt and would just come up with something and say, hey, it's required that you do this, but if you do A, B, C, and D, this is going to lead to E. I think that makes a difference, and sometimes you have to spell it out for individuals. And like I said, sometimes it depends on who it comes from. I seem to be pretty successful with infiltrating into the minds of some individuals, I guess because I can relate to where they're coming from, and they know that they can't snowball me or tell me anything or why they didn't do this and they didn't do that. Well, I'm going to say, well, yes, they did, and that was available to you. Why didn't you take advantage of it?
Thank you.
Good morning, and I'd like to say as a former probation officer, I can appreciate all of your comments this morning. My question is that you help more than 800 or so individuals find jobs. How do you break that ice with employers, and what skills, do you have a program that the ex-offender is participating in that he has to be successful at? How do you make that connection? Because I think one of the big problems you hit on is finding jobs and employers. If you put more than 800 people to work, you're doing something to relax employers to be able to trust the folks that you're sending to them.
Believe it or not, it's the other way around. We get the individuals who come through our program, we get them to a point where the employer trusts them. A lot of the employers that we work with, yeah, we deal with a lot of individuals with the criminal backgrounds, but our pitch is that we go to them and say, hey, we've got this person, they have a criminal background. Normally, there's been a lot of different cases where the individual, we would send them, they're just prepared. We do a great job training them. 99% of the reasons that an individual cannot get a job is simply because they do not know how to go about it. Not because they have a criminal background. That's the number one call that I get. I can't get a job because I have a criminal background. That's a myth. That's not true. You can get a job. It just depends on where you go, where you're looking. One of the things that we tell individuals, you cannot go to the places with the flashiest signs, with the biggest corporations. You might have to start in a mom and pop. So we talk to them about that. What does that angle look like? Some people, they can take a straight shot. But some people, their loop is going to be a little bigger. We're all trying to get to the same destination, but what we tell them is your journey is based on the things that you've done in your past, not on us. So what is it that you're willing to do to get to that point that we're all trying to get to? Your terrain is going to be a little tougher, and you might have to start here. But being here, I promise you that in 18 months, if you do this, 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 and this, you'll be here. It might not be with an extra $1.50, but you're on the road to success. And just getting them to a point to be patient, to have a little gratitude, to be a little bit humble. And that's what I do. A lot of my pitches to the employer to say, hey, give this guy a chance or give this young lady a chance. I've had employers who shut the door and say, hey, look, we're going to keep that between me and you. It's about presentation. It's about your image. It's about you being able to put on a persona, be able to speak articulate, and you look different than what your criminal background says or whatever that may be. That's all it's about. We just train them. We empower them. We dress them. We show them, you know, how they should speak. We tell them how they should dress. We show them the pitfalls that they've been putting themselves in by the way that they approach looking for employment. Then we talk to them about once you get it, how do you keep it? How do you move forward? You know, how do you approach a job? When you go in, oh, I just got this job, I'm just going to do this. I know it's $750. Do you go in that door and you kick that door down and you say, hey, listen, whatever you feel comfortable allowing me to do, I'll work my way from that point until I prove to you that I'm capable of being trusted.
So what you're saying, or what I'm hearing, is your recommendation sort of is this, that the Department of Corrections needs to have training available for the motivated inmate, and even the inmate that's not motivated, to become motivated. Once they become motivated, they want to be something other than they are right now, then we need to have some type of halfway house system that they can go into. But that halfway house is not in their home county. It's away from where they committed their offenses. And through the halfway house, they'll demonstrate that they're still motivated, and it'll give them the opportunity to prove themselves to others, and then they will become a successful citizen. Is that sort of your dream there?
That's sort of my dream. I think that each individual's situation is different. I think that the halfway houses, the thing I like about them is the structure that a halfway house has, you know, but like the halfway house that I was in, it was for 6 months. But sometimes people need more time than that. Sometimes they need more structure. And it may be a year in a structured environment or something like that. It just depends. I was able to succeed within 6 months, but I see a lot of people who struggle, who need maybe a 3-month extension. But what they need is structure. Do they necessarily need to be away from their family, or do they need to be in a brand new location? Yes, and yes, I benefited from it. I thought it was good because it allowed me to just build from scratch. Some individuals, you know, they get incarcerated and they really weren't out in the streets, but they don't really have a lot to live up to. So maybe they don't need to be aware. I think some cases are specific, but to me, the ideal situation would be a remote place, away from individuals, just to work on themselves first, keep that structure, go to a job, understand what it is to pay your bills for a little while, because when you're incarcerated, you don't do those things. You don't pay bills, you get up and you go to work. I mean, you just don't do the things that responsible citizens are doing.
And under the federal system, you're still technically under BOP control in the halfway house.
Correct,
And if you violate any of the rules, you're violated and sent back.
Right.
So if we went to the halfway house or recommended that, we still need that control over the inmate to keep him, I ain't gonna say motivated, but to encourage his motivation. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I agree with that. With classes that are being offered in the halfway house.
Doing everything to prevent it.
Right.
Thank you.
Robert, I heard you mention your children, and one of the things that we see in our facilities, young people sometimes, is the fact that many of their parents have served prison sentences. What is it that you're now saying to your children and that we as a body could do in a prevention effort? Because that is equally as important to keep other people out of facilities and make our streets safe. What is it that you would say to your children, and how could you help us with that effort?
Well, for me and my children, their mother and myself, we communicated a lot about still being parents, talking to them about the mistakes that I made, talking to them about the importance of education and the importance of values. So we stuck to that. We still kept our standard in regards to what we taught them as far as parents. I have a daughter that's 4.0 student. She's been accepted to Duke, but I also have one that's in some trouble as well. That there's no perfect parent, there's no guarantees. But one thing that I did, my kids were mad at me. My children were angry at me. And it took a while, and that's another stressor, but it took patience. I worked on it, and I worked on it, and I worked on it, and I just kept working on it, and then I just said I was sorry, I apologized, and a lot of individuals, those are just communication skills, teaching individuals. But I learned a lot of this while I was in these classes too, about how to apologize, learning, that she's the victim, I'm not the victim, not blaming, being able to sit down with her and talk to her about what I've done and how proud I am of her and what I'm trying to do to repair that, and being consistent with it.
Mr. Battle, I also wanted to talk to you about when you first went in. It seems like you were pretty motivated fairly early to avail yourself of classes and learn some skills while you were incarcerated. But there are a lot of people you mentioned that aren't motivated to that. I was wondering if you could just maybe surmise what kinds of things do you think should be offered either at intake or to separate those people or to at least distinguish between inmates while they're there so that they spend more time doing some positive things for themselves rather than sort of drowning in, some of the bad skills that they can share with each other when they're not motivated.
If it were up to me, I would like to see individuals like myself on the inside of prisons, when they come in, talking to individuals about, okay, you're here, now what's next? Are you going to waste your time? Let's talk about what's available to you. Let's talk about if you do some things, how this can kind of change your life around. A lot of that doesn't take place. When you usually come in, there's a lot of emotions that are going on too. When you're first incarcerated, I can tell you, my first 12 months of incarceration, I didn't believe it was real. There were many mornings or nights that I woke up and I thought I was going to wake up and I was going to be home. It took me about 18 months before I even got to a point where I was comfortable, where I set up a routine. But I think that I think that an inmate is no different than an inmate than a brother or sister or mother. It's just positive reinforcement. If we set something up where there was something positive or someone to go talk to about moving forward in a positive environment where everyone was trying to do the same thing. See, that's one thing about it. If you have 2 or 3 individuals sprinkled in a group of individuals and they want to do something positive, they may not be as outspoken about it, but if you can create an environment where everyone in this room is on the same page trying to do the same thing, then that's a little bit different.